Well, thanks so much. So we can turn the lights down a bit and all get into the mind and frame of mind of being an ant. Ulrich, that was great, and I really appreciate ESI for inviting me here. You know, I did grow up reading the books of the early 19th century explorers, and I'm often asked how I got to actually kind of have this kind of career, and I really have no idea, but basically I went for my passion, and my passion started very early. In fact, let me get my gizmo over here. In diapers, I was studying ants, and people ask, Mark, why do you study ants? What happened? And I say, what's the matter? When you were in diapers, you were down there with me watching ants. What went wrong with you? And it's true, we drift away from nature in different ways, but I've found as someone who still loves nature and really hasn't changed that much, I suppose. I don't wear diapers in case that comes up, but that it's useful to have the vantage points that children have. And one of those vantage points is being down in the dirt watching ants, and the other one is being up in the trees. How many people climbed trees as kids? Actually, I should find out here. Yes, very interesting indeed. And so I grew up with these two different points of view that are kind of different aspects of nature that we forget about when we grow up. Incidentally, this was a picture, I'll just give the one picture story, that I did for an article on acorns and life in an acorn and things that would move into acorns. And the question, I was a graduate student and already doing stories for National Geographic. I had figured out how to take pictures early on, a good story in itself, how I did that. But the editor comes together with me. I go to National Geographic, and we're talking through the story, and she says, you need something that reminds people that acorns come from oak trees. People forget even the obvious things, and that was one of the lessons she had. And another lesson is to try to compress a story into a picture. And her idea is I'd have like an acorn in the bottom of the tree, in the oak tree, and there would be a bird flying by carrying an acorn, showing how they're dispersed, and maybe a rainbow so I could talk about the weather that is involved in dispersal of acorns, blah, blah. So I didn't get exactly all those things, but even this was kind of problematic. I actually took this picture in Harvard Yard, and I don't know if you've been to Harvard, but there's a lot of angst and anxiety going on in people at Harvard, and this was reflected in this picture by the fact that I had to lie on my stomach with my head in a hole to shoot up at the appropriate angle, and the police were called twice, and I eventually put a sign on my back saying, "Photographer, keep away." That was understandable to these people. So the point of view of being down on the ground and up in the trees, and I continue to climb trees, and I do that even today. I climb trees in a lot of places, including some big trees. This is a 300-footer over in Oregon, and so that's still useful for me, and being down on the ground with the ants is still useful for me, and it's a point of view that's important, of course, for the photograph, too, because if you're going to photograph an infant, you don't want to see the top of his or her head. You have to be down there with the infant. That's a rule of success in photography, and it's the rule of success in understanding things for science, too. You have to enter their world to really reflect upon how things live and the problems they face. So in this case, this ant is about standing maybe 2 millimeters high, and so I always say that I'm not paid unless I'm covered with mud. And this is a good example of a picture where you don't want to actually see what I look like. And so I've gone out and looked for stories. And basically what I found out young from reading these adventure books and in science as well as photography is that life is about stories, no matter what you study. If you study mathematics, the stories are probably going to be pretty esoteric to most people. But for biologists, you can go out and find things out about the world and convey them with passion to people in unexpected ways and make them surprised by something. Some stories are obvious, some stories are a complete surprise. In this particular case, this was a cartoon published in National Geographic's Front Matter of me sitting on the most deadly snake of the New World, the fer-de-lance. I sat directly on its head, which, if you think about it, is the only correct way of sitting on a deadly snake. And this is Doug Yu, standing to the side, who saw this happen by accident, I will add those words, and later informed people that he would not have sucked out the blood if I had been bitten. Friends are important in biology, as in anything else. So in this particular case, I'm going to be talking about ants, because I've spent the last 7 years, well, I've watched ants since I was in diapers, I've established that, but for the last 7 years I've been focused on a book rather than other science, and just trying to get this book out there involved traveling around the world and looking for the most dramatic examples of ants and reflecting upon their behavior as you see them in the field. I'm trying to give people a flavor of how scientists come up with questions and answers and some of the adventures along the way, both for the ants and for me. So in this particular picture, which is near the front of the book, shows the base of a pitcher plant. And a pitcher plant, of course, is a carnivorous plant which has a liquid in it that digests prey. And the ants actually, in Borneo, nest in the base of this pitcher. There's a little curlicue at the base of the pitcher. The water is over here somewhere in the pitcher. And then the ants actually make a nest, this particular ants, inside this curlicue. And here's one coming out. We're going to get back to that. That's a story of ants and plants. But the story is that I wanted to tell that hadn't been really told were ants in the environment. Some of the really cool things that I've experienced with ants is being out in nature with them. You spend a lot of time in the pouring rain in a rainforest. That's why it's called a rainforest. So you end up I have spent so many hours watching ants in the rain. And rain is a rather traumatic thing if you're the size of an ant. And it turns out, scattered through the literature, there are various stories about the fact how ants swim and survive in rain, and I found a few stories of my own. But the pitcher plant became a fabulous story when one researcher, a graduate student, a guy named Roger Kitching, Mr. Clark, discovered something about this pitcher plant, and he found out that the ants that nest in that pitcher plant I just showed you actually leap into the water and free dive. The first swimming ants. And this is looking down the pitcher plant. This is the rim of the pitcher. And what the ants do is they seem to have a preference for pulling out the largest prey. And so I went to Brunei, Borneo to see this. It seems like such a fantastic story that I couldn't believe it. So it turns out to be pretty true as far as I could tell in my 5 days watching them. They seem to like large prey. This is a cricket that's fallen in and has been killed by the pitcher plants, drowned in the water. And these ants swim down, and 2 or 3 of them together can pull out this large prey. And what they do is they haul it up to the rim of the pitcher at the top here. And what happens, actually, is that the large prey can't be digested by the pitcher very well. These things just foul up and eventually kill the pitcher. The water goes bad, and the pitcher dies. So the ants carry up these large pieces of prey, whole prey in the case of this cricket, up to this rim. And here's the next picture is a view looking up from below at what happens in this rim maybe an hour later. Here are the ants up there eating the cricket, and pieces of the prey, like this leg, will fall back into the liquid in the pitcher, and those pieces are small enough that the pitcher can digest them. And so these ants are like the plant version of Tums. They stop indigestion in pitcher plants. The other cool thing, as I said, is climbing trees. You tend to have the unusual perspective of looking down at nature. And in climbing trees around the world, actually, I'll say, by growing up surrounded by people studying rainforests and reading books about rainforests, I kept hearing about how unique rainforests were. And it's true that rainforests are unique. They have all these species in them. Just their physical space and diversity leads to a very complex ecosystem. But there are issues about how a rainforest is put together. And you'll read everywhere about how rainforests have all these layers, and these layers cut out the light and the wind and all these features of the forest. And I asked myself, well, that's true, but if I was an ant, what would, say, this meadow outside of Rio look like? And I started looking around and found that there's a fellow in New Zealand studying mowed lawns an inch thick. And a mowed lawn, believe it or not, has several layers in it, cuts out more light and more wind. So for an ant, being on the ground in a mowed lawn would be more extreme than being in a rainforest. And it's true throughout many different kinds of ecosystems. So again, it's useful to think of the world from the point of view that's unexpected, including the children's point of view. Now, for an ant, moving around in these communities can be quite a problem. And this shows up well in the natural rainforest. This is a view of a rainforest in Malaysia where the understory trees, the smaller trees and shrubs have been cut away. So you can look up at the canopy, the upper canopy, where the trees turn out to form a kind of a jigsaw pattern with spaces between them. This is called crown shyness. And this is a big problem for all kinds of animals getting around in the forest from tree to tree if you live up there. So even humans have this problem. And I've climbed redwoods with this man, Steve Sillett, who's kind of a real buckaroo. And here he is transferring from one tree to the next using ropes. And you can imagine, well, it's hard for humans, impossible for ants. It turns out ants find a way to get from tree to tree because they occupy the canopy in great numbers, and they have to control all this space up there. We'll get back to that. And they can do it in a number of different ways, but one of the coolest is shown by the old world weaver ants. And these ants actually will, there's this gap, one tree on this side, another tree on this side. The ants see the other tree, and they'll build up and form a finger, like Cirque du Soleil performers, extending towards the other tree, and eventually the two trees will rock together in the wind momentarily enough for the ants at the end of that finger to grab onto the other side, and suddenly they're strung out in a rope from one tree to the next. And here they are. And this has to be the worst job in the ant colony. Because like all your friends get to run over and eat all that great food that's on the other side, and you get stuck holding on to the next ant. And these chains seem to last for days. Another recent discovery is the fact that ants can actually glide from tree to tree. If you climb a tree, please try it sometime, even as a grown-up, and you see an ant, you will notice that if you disturb it very much, it will often simply leap off. And sometimes they're knocked off purpose by, say, a bird passing by, but they'll often just leap. And it turned out recently it was discovered that ants actually, even though they don't have wings, can glide from tree to tree. Here's an ant doing that, a cephalotes or turtle ant. And this is showing the posture that it uses, which is a lot like a parachutist. You know, you stretch your legs like this, and you can control where you go by just moving your body back and forth a little bit. This particular picture, this is, I usually take pictures in nature, but this picture I took using what I call my volunteer ant supply. Ants were on rainy afternoons when it was impossible to do anything else. I would bring my volunteers in to this field station where I was staying, and I would steer them off a little branch, and they would leap past the camera. This is my 6,252nd attempt. And finally could finish its volunteer time and return home. Well, a lot of what I'm going to talk about next is something I think is particularly cool, and it's one of the themes of the book, and that is the patterns that emerge as societies change in size. And some of these patterns are common between ants and people. And it turns out that ants have the same range of sizes of societies as humans do, from a couple dozen in a hunter-gatherer group up to millions in a city-state. And over that range, there's many of the same patterns that emerge. And I actually think that in many ways, ants are more like modern people than even a chimpanzee. And that's simply because, heck, chimpanzees don't need to worry about public health issues and sanitation and build roads or big infrastructures of other kinds and deal with market economies and voting. Believe it or not, ants have elements of all these things. And so I'm going to compare some of the large and small societies of ants. These are different species that have different strategies. Some of the species that have small colonies occur in very obscure places. This is a species we collected in Costa Rica, living in a hollow twig, fallen to the forest floor. It decays down the center, and the ants move in. And you see there are just a few workers. The queen is there, and there could be a dozen or two. We'll get back to this ant. And then finding these species with small societies are the coolest, because the big ones are obvious. I mean, they're invading your picnic. They're moving in swarms in different places. Those are obvious. The really cool ants for the professional connoisseur ant person are the ones found by this man, Lloyd Davis, who's the premier fellow if you need to find some very curious ants, because he has the capacity. Here he is with David Donoso, another myrmecologist or ant person. He has the capacity to look at a pile of dirt collected from the rainforest floor in these white pans for hours, looking for specks that move. And eventually you find one and you go, Eureka, and you've actually heard him say that. Now, one of the cool things about some of these small societies is tempo. The comparison between small and large societies. You probably, if you're from a small town and you go to Manhattan on 42nd Street, it's just insane. What are the people doing? Why are they all running all the time? And it turns out that there are reasons for this, studied by some people recently at the Santa Fe Institute and so forth. And ants show the same pattern. As you get larger and larger societies, individuals tend to move faster and faster. Well, why is this? Well, on people, the logic is that if you live in a small town, you know who you're going to see at the coffee shop. You know what's going to unfold during the day as you go from place to place. There's no reason to rush it. Why have a heart attack? But if you live in a bigger city, like here in Austin, and you move around enough, you can find out things like there's a lecture on ants, there's a play going on, there are cool people that you can meet, almost randomly even on the streets, and so there's more payoff for type A behavior. And the ants show the same aspects of speed. Let's look first at a slow ant. This is one of them that Lloyd Davis found on our trip to Ecuador. This is a species of what I call the mud ant. It covers itself with mud and moves at glacial speed. It's pretty much the slowest imaginable ant. And it turned out that this particular species specialized on, well, what you might expect. Here it is going after its prey, the snail. And in this picture, the snail is making a dramatic left-hand turn to escape. This is fabulous, because normally with ants, they're pouring over you, they're pouring past you, there's chaos, you're trying to take pictures. Here, you just get a hammock, you put gear down, you lean over, okay, maybe I'll take another picture in a minute. Now, as societies get bigger and bigger in ants, speeds of the workers accelerate, and you suddenly start seeing lots and lots of interactions. And what the ants are doing is they're actually learning from each other. They will pass each other, as has been shown in some species, and detect what those other individuals that they're passing by are doing for the day. This was doing nursery work, this was out foraging, and those individual ants will learn from everybody else's activity and choose their own job for the day. Okay, I think I'll go into foraging. So ants actually, as the groups get bigger, can gather this kind of information, and the colony as a whole gets smarter. Communications, of course, is part of this. And as the group gets bigger and bigger, there's more interaction and faster communication. Certainly we see that in our own current lives. A small society depends on independence, and very little communication often happens. The smallest ant society recorded is of this creature, Thaumatomyrmex. This is one of the holy grails of rare ants. Many people have looked for their whole lives and found one. On our expedition to Ecuador, we found our one. And this ant is cool because it has, first of all, societies. The biggest colonies are about 4. And they have very specialized behaviors because they're out there on their own. There's not communication going on, there's independence. And just like in a small group of hunter-gatherers, you have to be able to do things solitarily a lot. And this is one of the individuals here. And it turns out that these ants eat a tiny millipede that looks like a porcupine. It's covered with bristles, very hard for other kinds of creatures to catch and eat. And it has these jaws with enormous long teeth that can hold on to these bristly little creatures and strip away the hairs which are falling off to the side. So that's a specialized job indeed. Here's the approach to the millipede, the only exciting thing in the life of the ant. You want to do it again? Bigger and bigger colonies have a lot more communication going on. Not only are they taking in what other ants are doing just by perceiving things about the ants, but they're actually telling each other. The information is being conveyed about where food is, where to go, where battles are going on, this kind of thing. And those are, of course, mostly conveyed by scent, which works very well. Odors, little bursts of scent that the ants detect on each other or on the ground if they leave the scent there. And so you'll constantly see ants in larger communities stopping and checking each other out almost instantaneously, and they're actually gathering various kinds of information about the identity of the ant, making sure it's a friend, and about what's going on in the colony. Bigger and bigger societies sometimes convey information very fast. This is particularly in army ants, which tend to move very densely, so there's almost no delay time going from one ant to the next. We'll get back to them in a little bit. And with this communication comes the possibility of other species cracking your code. And this is shown in this picture, where you actually see what looks like a bunch of the same ants going by. This is an army ant from South America. But one of these ants is actually a beetle, looking very much like an ant. It's actually the one over here holding its little abdomen in the air and its antennae are straight, rather than crooked like the ant's antennae are. And this particular beetle is a species that actually is kind of like an ant dog. It begs for food, the ant seems to put up with it. Some of these species are a little more malicious, I'll show you one later. Specialization, another pattern that emerges. In a small group of hunter-gatherer humans, everyone usually is able to do just about any chore that comes up. There's not a lot of extra bodies, so you have to be able to take over a job. And as bigger and bigger societies form, you get more and more jobs. So a small town may not need many jobs in humans. You get to a big city, and the advertisements in the papers are full of hundreds of kinds of job opportunities. And the same pattern shows up in ant societies as they get bigger and bigger. So small ant societies, you have to be a generalist and do anything that comes up. And for this reason, some of these ants are very cool. This is the species that lived in that hollow twig on the forest floor that I showed you earlier. This is the end of the twig here, and the ant is guarding the entrance, and there's a little thing called a pseudoscorpion that's trying to get inside the colony. And this kind of ant I call, it's a Canthognathus for the people that need the technical name. I call these Swiss Army ant because it seems to have a tool set built into its face. There's a very long set of jaws here, and then a smaller set down here. And this is what I call kind of an ideal picture for National Geographic, because everywhere you look is part of the story. So there's this ant defending the nest entrance, and back here is the larvae or developing ant eating a springtail, which is the food that this ant catches. And springtails are kind of the rabbits of the insect world, or arthropod world, because they're very, very numerous. There are millions in your backyard, and they jump all over the place, so they're very, very hard to catch. And these ants, with their tool chests, can do it. And here's one approaching a springtail here in the forest floor in Costa Rica. Its jaws are stretched out like a bear trap, and there are prongs at the tip, like a bear trap would have. And they have hairs that extend forward exactly the right distance. So when they touch the springtail, those hairs, it tells the ant it's at the right spot, and the spring-loaded trap goes forward, and the ant, those prongs go right into the springtail and stop it from moving. You have to lift it up in the air pretty fast and sting it to knock it out. So here it is, holding the springtail with its long jaws. The springtail, the tail part, is here. And that knocks out the springtail, keeps it from reviving, because the hope of the ant is to get back before the springtail does revive. And I've seen them that where this doesn't work very well, they're carrying the springtail home as high in the air as they can, because if the springtail revives from this poison, it will start springing, and the ant and the springtail are thrown in the air and not good. Now, there are some of these trapjaw ants, this is an Asian one, that don't have this whole tool set, and they have a little problem feeding. So here's an marauder, it's called, a long trap. You see the hair that sets off the trap here. And what they have to do, they bring back the food, and then they have to chew the food way out here. And then they have to walk forward, eat, and then they have to circle around and chew again. It's just total chaos that are able to colony. Now, if you have a smaller set of jaws built in, it's actually part of the same jaws with a long tooth, but you see it looks like a normal set of insect jaws or animal jaws right there. They can chew in one spot without causing all this turmoil. You get bigger colonies and you get all this division of labor. You don't have these tool sets anymore. What you have are different kinds of ants that do different things. You know, in humans you can tell a construction worker from a lawyer maybe by how they dress and some other things. And ants, it's size and shape. In many of these species with large colonies, there's a range of sizes with different shapes. And this is the most extreme one of all. This is the marauder ant. And those ants, the workers in the colony, range in size 500 fold. So here's what's called a minor worker, a little one. And this is the head of the major worker, 500 times its size. And the shapes of the ants and their sizes allow them to do different work well. So the larger ants actually, well, first of all, the smaller ants in this marauder ant, the small minor workers, are very good at rushing forward and catching the prey. And we'll get back to that a little bit later. And the big ones do the death blow. So this is a bunch of small ones pulling down the centipede that one of the big ones is killing. Another thing that the big ones do in this species is they serve as school buses for the small ones. There's a bunch of them going off to class, which is basically off to the raid where they will find out suffer a lot of death. But they're carried there by these big ants. Why would that be? Well, it turns out all these small ones, if you work out the energetics, all the small ones walking separately would burn a lot more energy than when they ride on big ants. So this is good economics. These ants are green. Now, this particular picture was shown earlier, but these green ants include some that have one job only. And the army ant, the Ulrich showed on my finger, is one that I hope you see if you get down to Central America like Costa Rica. They're along, the soldiers are along the edges of their highways with their white heads and big jaws. And to look more closely at that insect bite picture, doesn't that look like a fish hook? And what they do is they are specialists at attacking entomologists and other naturalists. And this is actually, you can imagine the length of jaw that was in the previous picture. It's going down to the bone, and there's the stinger that goes in at the other end that turns things purple. And I have a whole series, so if you have a medical book you're writing, I can give those to you. So far, I haven't had any takers for the entire series. But the tips of these fishhooks are actually like fishhooks. It's a little recurved at the end with a knife blade. So when these ants bite you, it's kamikaze. They cannot pull their jaws out. So the only way to remove them, if this comes up, is to get your Swiss Army knife with those little scissors and chop off the jaws and then tweezer them out. Another way of dealing with labor that has been a sad part of human history and a fairly common occurrence in ants is actually to steal your labor, slavery. And ants do that across North America and Europe particularly. And this gray species in this case is enslaved by this reddish one. And in this particular ant from Lake Tahoe, a hotbed for this kind of activity, the slave masters are so dependent on their slaves that they will starve to death unless a slave hands them food. You can put food right in front of the ant, they don't know how to eat unless there's a slave to give the food to them. Assembly lines and teamwork. Again, you don't need these in a small society, but they emerge as societies of ants get bigger. And here's one of the fun situations where this is very clear. We saw the soldier army ant with the long fishhook mandibles, and there are 3 other sizes of these army ants. The soldiers and then 3 smaller ones. And it turns out that the next size down, called the submajor with the yellow head here, is strong enough to lift up the prey. The army ants are killing all kinds of prey and chopping it to pieces, and only these submajors can actually carry the weight. But as soon as they start carrying the food along, one of the media workers, the next size down, grabs the dragging end and keeps it from dragging. So they work as an efficient team to move the food along. The really cool job in the society, though, was only discovered rather recently because the smallest ants are so small and hard to see. What it turns out they do is they serve as living road fill. They fill potholes along the road as the ants use, and there's one actually lying down underneath these larger ants so they have a nice streamlined route back to the nest. What a thing to do for life. You get smaller societies, and these kinds of teamwork and assembly lines don't work as well. This is a case of a species with only a few thousand workers. It's called Daceton from South America. And those ants have trouble coordinating these kind of operations. And so here you have 2 ants that have caught a caterpillar, and they're trying to work together as a team, but they can't quite do it. So they keep pushing against each other until they've actually wrung out all the juice from the caterpillar, turning it into kind of a moist rag. These 2 flies are stealing the remaining juice. By the time they get it home, they're probably going to have nothing left. The ultimate in teamwork, and particularly assembly lines, though, is shown by the leafcutter ants. And you have a species around here. They're most famous in tropical America with their huge caravans of leaf-carrying workers. And those workers, as you may have heard, actually don't eat leaves. They'll lick a bit of the liquid from a leaf, but they don't eat the leaf. They actually chop up the leaves and turn it into a mulch on which they raise a fungus underground in special fungus gardens. Here's the view below ground, and this particular ant is collecting grasses. You see all the little grass stems, and the white things are the fungus. This is a fully domesticated fungus that the ants only lives with the ants, and the ants have an extreme assembly line to cut up the leaves, make this mulch, plant the fungus on the mulch, remove foreign kinds of fungi, weeds, and even apply certain kinds of pesticides that they produce. So basically, these ant assembly lines do everything that you can think a human farmer does. And Ulrich Müller here has been central in discovering a lot of the aspects of the relationship between these ants and their fungi. Here's one of the smallest ants, and its job is to take a tuft of this fungi, which has these little edible tips that only are found with the species that live with the ants, and planting it in a new part of the garden. Infrastructure. Well, another thing you don't need, if you're a hunter-gatherer group of a dozen individuals, you don't need to build no highway. Highways just don't come up. And usually you can have very temporary structures like a teepee that you can take and move where you want. And so as groups get bigger and bigger, more kinds of infrastructure seems to emerge in them, and that's true of ants too. So, well, here's like, I don't know what this is. This is like a nice little, this is a species of Fidole ant from Argentina. They have this nice little courtyard with palm trees in it. I don't know. This is like a really aesthetic ant. But here's an actual more serious example of architecture in the leafcutter ants. And there are enormous colonies. There are big ones in Texas, and they get bigger when you get down to Paraguay. This is a picture taken from an airplane, just to give you a different point of view. These are palm trees here, and the white are the leafcutter mounds, which can be as big as this stage across. And the white is actually just the sand they've dug up from below, so they appear nicely in this picture. And those nests can have thousands of chambers, very well organized, including chambers just for throwing out trash and other functions. And in addition to that, they have highways, and these thoroughfares can be a foot wide and extend for hundreds of feet. And at least one species has a highway system much like you see, I don't know if you have something exactly like this in Austin, but like in Washington, D.C. and Boston, they actually have beltways circulating the colony out here. So the ants can go out and then circle around here and go out here, and those beltways are actually below ground. So highways are a big deal. They are arteries to get the food back, and conveying, all this nutrition to the colony is, of course, central to the economics of the society. So they put a lot of investment in it. This is the highway of the marauder ant with a school bus worker, and this reveals another function of these big individuals in the society. In the marauder ant, the big ones serve as heavy-duty road equipment. Here's one thing that they do. I don't know if you've seen any documentaries about India, but you will probably have heard at least that what the Indians, what the elephants do over there is that they will actually get up under, down under like a log and shove the log off with their heads to open up a trail or a highway. And the ants do the same thing with their heads. Here's one shoving off a log, in this case a little twig, of course, but actually bring up the trail. Once you've got a clear path for it, you smooth it out, you remove anything you can't push off. So here's one gnawing away a twig that it can't pull off, and you have this perfect highway. Now, the one kind of ant that doesn't invest a lot of effort in infrastructure, even though it has huge societies, are the army ants, and that's because they're constantly on the move. Army ants are predatory species that can kill large prey in many cases and actually attack other kinds of ants a lot. And they have to move constantly to find fresh prey, and so they don't have a lot of time to build things. So instead of building a perfect highway, they have the ant that actually sits down in the hole in the road that I showed earlier. And instead of building a nest, they actually simply link up their bodies into this huge mass. And this is one of these masses forming. This is a single ant here holding up maybe 30 of her nestmates. And eventually, all those ants come together, and you can have hundreds of thousands of ants in a big mass hanging from a log that can be as big as a bushel basket or more. My favorite ants, though, are the weaver ants for this, because they actually weave together the leaves in a tree. They actually pull them together. Here the ants are. This is in Southeast Asia, these pictures. And they align the leaves up, and then another ant comes out and stitches the leaves together using the silk of their larvae. Let me skip to this here. I'm going to show you a little video about this, just so you can see what it's like to be in the field with some ants. The highlight of the Angkor Wat is up in the trees. Forget the statues. Here we have one of the great ants of the world, one of the great social creatures of the world, living in these nests of bound leaves. And inside these nests are thousands of these weaver ants,
orange and red, and there are nests all around me, and there can be hundreds of these nests for a single colony. They build these nests of leaves that are pulled together and woven by their larvae. Yes, they use child labor in the ant world of Asia. Somewhere amongst all those nests, in a single nest in the middle, well protected, is the queen. I don't think we'll find her today without a great deal of pain. What they do is they bite into your skin, and then they spray formic acid in the wound. Really wakes you up. Good way to start the day. They roam around and leap on you, and they seem to enjoy it. And I can even smell them in the acid. And what makes these ants important in Cambodian cuisine, that tasty tang, that citrusy lusciousness that's part of their cuisine. We'll see that a little bit later. Oh, inside the nest of the weaver ant. See what it's like in there. It'll be a lot of fun. Here we are preparing for an ant feast just outside of Angkor Wat in the small village where they've gotten a nice ant omelet for all the kids. Let's see how they like it. Here we are at Top Round Temple. We're going to see if these tourists like these yummy ants as much as we all did yesterday. It's an omelet with some special local ingredients. Very fresh. Which is, what are they again? They are basil, it's a little cardamom, a little salt, some ant larvae, and you put the ones without the ant larvae on this end? You can have them fresh. You have to eat them before they bite your tongue. Right in here, and they'll eat, you get some clay and you mold it to the shape of a cow and it's gone. Too easy, though, Fred. What do you think? A little more like basil?
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
a little more butter? I think we got the recipe wrong. Hello? You want to try Hey. This one. I think you answered. You know this?
Yes, I know.
What do you call it? Yeah, you know the town. What's the name?
Cambodian.
Yeah.
Krong.
Wrong, right. But it's delicious. You want it? Oh, wait a minute, you're so fine. Okay, we're going to go like 5 minutes over. Don't panic. But I have to tell you about some warfare. You know, it's pretty exciting stuff. The ants don't have a lot of romance going on for the kids over that, but they have a lot of fighting. And what happens in societies is that as they get bigger and bigger, there seems to be more of an excess labor force that can be diverted into aggression. Unfortunately, that's been true of the history of humans as well. And the ants show it in spades, as we all probably know. The weaver ants I just showed you are very aggressive. They control the canopy of trees in Africa and Asia and Australia, and they are relentless about attacking other species. They even kill army ants, which are much tougher and just more numerous than they are. The weaver ants are very agile. They'll reach in and grab these big hulks and tear them to pieces. The ant world has figured out just about everything about warfare we have. They actually use most of the principles of warfare that humans have developed over time. And they've even come up with things like suicide bombers. This is a species in Borneo that actually walks up to an enemy and explodes, producing a yellow toxic glue. And this is the ant that is, it squeezes its body so hard that the body ruptures, and it kills both the ants and its enemies in this tableau instantly. The canopy, though, is a real boon for power and warfare in the ant world. You know, we just don't get this bonus because to us, the rainforest, we walk along and we see a square yard of soil, and that's a square yard of soil. But if you look overhead, ants get about 10 times the amount of space. That's the number of leaves and branches overhead in any spot in a rainforest. And they can control a huge amount of territory with almost no effort if they live in the canopy, because all they have to defend are the narrow spots like the vines that connect one tree to the next and the base of the tree trunk, and they have a huge territory. So you can actually control that space with very little effort. In fact, what some ants do is actually destroy vines that climb onto their tree. This is one ant ripping one to pieces, and it removes the possibility of an invasion. On the ground, though, you have a lot of invasive species, a lot of aggressive species, aggressive species, particularly army ant-like species. And the marauder ant with the school bus is one of the more aggressive ones. It actually has swarms like army ants, and they will pour forward like a phalanx of Roman soldiers, but in a much bigger scale, and simply use shock and awe. They will knock out any enemy, and any food that they want to kill is handled very quickly through this sheer force of numbers. It pays to be offensive and fast in ants. And here's some pouring out, and they've caught a frog, as you see here. And in the front lines, it turns out, if you look at the Roman legions and how they operated, you always see these movies about, like, well, there's Mel Gibson, and he's always like that big guy running in the forefront. So I tell you, in real life, back then, the Romans had a different way of organizing things. They would put the cheap labor, the untrained farmers with their sticks, out front where they get slaughtered, and the big ones that they've invested all this effort and time into came in later. And it turns out to be the same pattern with army ants and the marauder ants. And so at the front lines, what you have are all those little miner workers, those tiny ants, that pour forward the fastest and meet the enemy first and their prey. And this is the situation in which they have come across from the front of the swarm a termite soldier with a big red head and nasty mandibles. And you see the soldiers actually chopped the head off this ant, the head off that ant, the hind end off this ant. They're just getting slaughtered. But what happens is as they pour forward, in time they will subdue anything just through sheer force of numbers. And then, and only then, do the slower major workers, the big soldiers, show up. and give that death blow that I mentioned earlier. When it's safe, and all these little ants have pinned down the enemy, in this case, food, too. Now, when I come along, and I'm going to, dig up their nest, all bets are off, and the ants just go crazy when you bother their home terrain, the nest area. So instead of National Geographic, and in every story I do, there's some part of my anatomy. You saw my finger earlier. Here's, my ankle. And all the ants at this point, small and large, pour up my body. That's a story that's in the book. You can read it to your children at night. Some smaller kinds of ants can't afford all this labor. They can't afford to be this aggressive, so they have to be more defensive. Here's a great example discovered by a guy named Jack Longino of an ant that actually has tool use. It actually has a doorway. See the door there? And the ant's coming out of this little entryway that's in a kind of a mushroom-shaped thing. And this is down in Ecuador. And here's an army ant coming up. And as soon as the ants here see these ferocious army ants arriving, they come out, grab the door, and close it. Now, army ants are in a particular position because they're experts at killing. And perhaps for this reason, between each other, army ants tend to have a kind of detente. Instead of going at each other and perhaps wiping each other out, they have standoffs. Here's a situation I saw in Peru, and this is the soldier of one species facing the smaller workers of another, and they parried a little bit, then they went their separate ways. The expert on army ants, Carl Rettenmeyer, called them the civilized insects because of this. If you get smaller societies, though, you have to be a little cautious about the way you go on attack. And the really cool species studied by Bert Holdobler is the honeypot ants, found down here and throughout the southwest. And those species actually fight over food in small groups. Will get together. They have colonies of a few thousand. And instead of going right to the jugular, what they do is they circle each other in a ritualized tournament, which is kind of a stare down, where the ants actually stand as high as they can and try to look bigger than the other ants. And the ants with the smallest workers get out of there pretty fast. And there's something actually called tactical deception that's only supposed to be found in intelligent creatures like ourselves. And here is shown in an ant, which is faking out the other ant by standing on a pebble that looks bigger. I'm going to close with a little story about identity, because that's, I think, the cool thing about ants. And here's a story of identity. This is a recently discovered spider behavior discovered recently in Australia. And it basically kills, it'll steal a larvae from one of the workers, one of the developing ants, and the odor of the larvae gets smeared on its body as it eats it, and it takes on the scent of the colony, because ants have a nationality basically determined by their body odor or scent. We use flags. In the case of ants, it's scent, and it's permanently sort of adhering to the bodies of the ants. They all instantly know friend from foe, and so the spider gets that sense, and suddenly it's able to move into their society as an ant. And it roams around, and it grabs their larvae and eats them every once in a while, surreptitiously perhaps to the side. And if it leaves that society, it leaves that ant colony and goes over to another society, it'll be attacked as a foreign ant. So this whole issue of identity is why ants form superorganisms, in my mind. Organisms, of course, come together in various ways. There are a bunch of cells, and they can be very simple. They don't need to be complicated. And these are volvox, the little microscopic organisms that are quite simple, or even simpler versions of this. But all organisms, small and large, have this absolute identity. Every cell in your body knows it's you. It will not, if you scrape off some skin cells on your chair and you leave here, those skin cells will not form a new you. They have no chance without you. Your immune system keeps your body together, and the sense of these ants do the same thing. So even sponges have this common identity. And this identity takes extreme forms in some of the invasive species, like the fire ant around here. And this is the Argentine ant, which I talk about in the book. And these invasive species basically build identities into huge colonies, in some cases super colonies with millions, billions, and even trillions of individuals forging a single alliance. And this is David Hallway. I was down in San Diego, where the largest battlefield ever recorded is occurring between two of these super colonies that are taking over much of Southern California. These colonies contain billions, if not trillions, of individuals for the largest ones. The largest colony extends from San Francisco all the way down to the Mexican border, and all the ants in it probably weigh more than the people in a small city. And along those borderlands, if you go to the right suburb near San Diego, you will find where these colonies collide. And at those points along the ground are just bodies, piles of bodies in the lawns of people that don't look under the grass blades and see what's going on. And millions of ants can die every month in these battlefields. So these invasive species, including the Argentine ants, in some places in Texas, the fire ants particularly, and the new species that you may have heard of, the raspberry ant, are very dangerous because, first of all, they give other ants a bad name, but they actually do a lot of destructive damage. They knock out other ant species, and they do things like they will kill the seeds and eat the seeds of plants that normally depend on native ants to be propagated, to be actually buried in the soil. And this is the Argentine ant in South Africa doing that to one of the native plants. Here in what's cool is down in Argentina is where this all began, because many of the most deadly invasive species, including the fire ants and the Argentine ants, came from the same river valley in Argentina, where they are together all the time, and they've so honed their battle skills, and I explain how this happens in the book, that they are formidable if they escape northern Argentina. They're like an Argentine soccer team. So here's an actual Argentine ant, the one taking over California, and the fire ant that's taken over much of the south. And the fire ant, if you've never looked closely at, this is the sting with that poison coming out that gives you such a bad reaction. They're fighting over a grasshopper down in Argentina, where they originally arose. And those ants actually live in a floodplain where the waters go up and down all the time, and they come down to the water's edge where they eat things like bodies of piranhas brought up by the river. And as the waters rise, they're forced to find new places to live, and they're so good now at moving to new places because the waters go up and down so much that anytime a new habitat comes along, they move in instantly. So a boat pulls up, they're up the gangplank and in New Orleans in a few days. They've become an expert at basically conquering the world. Now I want to end by saying, like, not all ants are these troublemakers. Our ants are essential to the ecology out there. The native species of the Southwest will propagate certain species of plants by burying the seeds. There are species of ants that actually pollinate plants, like this one does in Colorado. And it's not all aggression. The really interesting thing about ants is they do have a unified society with a tight bond, a unified bond that's really even beyond what humans experience. And that interaction between individuals in society is extremely functional and makes them important in the ecology around the world. Oops, and I was just about to finish, and I'm getting fuzzy signals. So go out there and study the ants. Thanks so much. Okay, at the end, I think you were up next.
Earlier, you were showing the asset of a do they not drown in the water themselves?
How do the ants that swim in the water not drown? Well, ants, it's a pretty extraordinary story. Someone in physiology should study these ants and biomechanics, because not only do they swim down, they can swim down for a couple, 3 minutes, but then they have to pull themselves up through the surface of the water, called the meniscus, which is really tough if you're small, and then pull this cricket up the slippery slope of a pitcher plant. So these are some kind of like super ants in general. But ants turn out to be pretty good swimmers. They have various kinds of strokes. They use like either 2 or 4 legs to stroke along, and the back legs as a rudder. And different kinds of ants have different techniques, and it makes sense because around the world ants are getting flooded out all the time. So you've probably heard about these rafting fire ants, for example. Well, I'm picking people over here, and I'm not sure.
We'll pick one more.
Oh, you're just fast over here. Over here now. But just
what is the biggest kind of ant?
the biggest kind of ant?
Yeah.
Well, that's actually a good question. The biggest kind of ants, as an individual ant, are the Campanodus gigas ants of Borneo, and the queen can be, enormous, and the workers look really huge, and then you tell people, oh, that's just the minor worker. You haven't seen the soldier yet. But the truth is, ants have 2 sizes, and the second size is more important. An ant colony is basically an insect's way of making a huge organism. So a colony of African army ants can weigh more than the average person. They're just spread out, where you don't see them, and they're monitoring and changing the environment in detail, underfoot, and surviving on small pieces of food that would make us starve. So it's much smarter to maintain lots of little ants than build big ants. So those science fiction movies with the giant ants make no sense. Ants are a huge creature if you look at them the right way. Okay, over here. Okay, I don't know. How about these 2 boys here? I don't know who to choose. How about you in the red shirt? Why are ants attracted to sugar? Well, ants, adult ants, only eat liquids. They have trouble swallowing solid food. Their larvae are the ones that eat all the prey. When they catch some protein, they give it to their youngsters, basically. And they use sugar, wherever they can get it, carbohydrates, to fuel basically their battles. So the adult ants are heavily reliant on the sugar. It's fast energy and liquid. One in the middle. Oh, well, there you are. How do ants hear? Well, they hear through their legs. And in fact, ants do sometimes use sound, or at least vibration. For example, if you're walking along, you may not know this, but you're like causing disasters for ants all the time. Because you'll step on their colony, and there's all these cave-ins underground. This is happening thousands of times a day, and you don't appreciate the difficulties ants have. Because at that point, everyone's buried somewhere. Some natural disaster, or an unnatural disaster. And what ants do is actually to vibrate their body when they're buried underground, and then all the other ants know to dig them up right there. Okay, I guess we'll get one more over here. Oh, okay. You, lady back there.
With the spider that goes into the ant colony, can the ants really not tell that it's a spider by looking at it?
Ants are not the brightest. And they basically rely entirely on this odor to determine sort of their nationality, as they put it. And that's enough for them. If you have that, if you can sing that national anthem, you're part of our group. And saying that about ants, I will actually say that ants do have individuality and personality going on. I believe this. I've watched ants at their level. I can distinguish individuals by their behavior. And you can actually, there's a lot of studies now showing that we think that ants, like honeybees, are such hard workers, but there are slacker ants in the colony. And they're the ones that do all the work. So I don't know about your family, but there's usually one person that does the dishes, and they're kind of annoyed by everyone that doesn't do the dishes. And ants essentially have this kind of thing. It's called elite if you do all the work. I think that's not a very good term for the one that does the dishes, but those particular individuals are pivotal in getting most of the work done in a colony. A little diversion there. Okay, I'm going to go back over here. Okay, up front here.
About 100 miles west of here near Mason, we see what the locals call cow ants. They're big, almost 3/4 of an inch long, black in the front, red in the back. but we only ever see individuals. Could that be an ant that actually has a solitary pattern? Or
A
maybe
cow ant. Oh, Rich, who is this? That's what I kind of thought. This is a ant fake. It's a kind of female wasp that looks a lot like an ant, and if it's the ant the thing we're thinking of, it would have a bad sting.
Yeah, really bad.
You have to look close. It doesn't have a petiole, which is the segment between the thorax and the abdomen, or something close to that. So avoid the sting and take a close look for that character, if you wish. Okay, let's get someone in the back. Okay, well, you're standing up. How can I... again.
So, when your leg was covered with all those ants, were they biting ants? And did you get stung a lot?
Do I get stung a lot by ants? Well, I consider it a form of passion because, it's their way of expressing things to me. When you grow up, a little bit older, you realize that all relationships have pain. Back over here. Okay, way in the back. You with a beard.
A few years ago, I was walking along a river, and I was watching some ants, and they had, killed a bunch of other ants, and they're actually stacking the dead ants in like a cone.
You sure you weren't watching the movie Phase 4, which is a fine science fiction film? But I'm not aware of this around here.
Yeah, it was just a couple blocks from here. I mean, the cone was only like this tall, and I don't know if they were friendly ants or enemy ants.
I don't know. I think we need some documentation and maybe some grammar emerge. Okay, in the back over here. Anybody in the back over here? Okay, we're trying the back over here. I'll go for the middle distance. Okay, you with the kiwi.
What's the general gender of like the brood of soldiers? Is it split male and female, or all male and female?
What's the gender of all the soldiers and other individuals? I actually have fun trying to do this talk without saying anything that people would normally say about ants anywhere in the talk, like the queen or anything else. But one of the cool things about ants is they are a sisterhood. They are all females. If you see something that looks like an ant, it is a female ant. There are males. There are just a very few of them. They look like little wasps. They actually have only one job. They have two jobs. They have the first job and then they die. They're fairly satisfying. Amazing parts. Okay, over here. Well, there's more questions in the middle, so I'm going to go with you.
Approximately how many species of ants are there?
Well, it varies from person to person. I guess 10, 12, 14,000. Some people would say more just because we haven't looked as closely as ants as we have at, say, birds. But at the moment, the number of ants and the number of birds are fairly close. So it's fairly similar. And they look a lot alike to us, but of course it's unfair because we're looking down at them as if we were on an airplane. If you get close to ants, you see all these cool things. They're actually gold and silver ants. They're ants with spines with curlicue. They're all kinds of very cool-looking ants. So it sounds like a lot of species, and they're very different. Okay, over here then.
Okay, if you had to be an ant, what type would you be?
If I had to be an ant, okay, well, definitely there's a boon for being the queen, but she just actually doesn't give any instructions. Her job is simply to crank out eggs, which doesn't sound very exciting to me. I think the actual ant to be is a replete ant. These are ants that eat for a living. They just stay in the nest and eat all day and get very, very fat and then doil out this food when other ants need it. And they live a fairly long time, and they're safe in the nest. They don't get all the angst and responsibility of all that egg laying. Yes.
You talked about stinging and biting. Do all ants sting and bite, or?
No, not all ants sting. Most ants will give you a nibble, particularly even some of the more shy ones if you push them hard enough. Stinging is something that's found in only some ants. It's particularly common in certain kinds of ants with smaller societies where they have to be able to kill prey on their lonesome, but also partially occurs in the fire ant with its huge society. So biting is what you usually get, but some bites can be serious, like the African army ant, which, unlike the South American species with those puncture jaws, actually can cut flesh. They have little knife blades. So you don't want to be caught in an African army ant raid. Yep. Oh, okay. Thanks, Joe, for redirecting me. Who's the most patient over here? Okay, front line.
So over the summer, I read that there was this type of ant that tastes like lime. I don't know.
That's probably the general description of an ant taste, because you have those, you know, all those aggressive compounds. And I showed the video of the villagers that collect the ants for food in Cambodia, and those ants particularly have a lot of nice spice to them. And that's all those defensive compounds. I should have said that earlier. This is the taste of ant aggression is a nice spicy acid. Okay, one more over here then. Oh, you're so diligent over to the left, I'll try you. What does ant eat? Well, this is the cool thing, because you have your vegetarian ants, like the leaf-cutter ants, and they never eat prey. They're not interested in any meat at all. They're strict vegetarians. And then you have carnivorous ants, like the army ants, that are total carnivores and won't touch vegetable matter. So it's kind of the same range as people. Do they eat worms? Why, yes. The worms, there's actually a cooking contest in Michigan involving worms. So I really think we should start to eat more worms. I hope you've all been trained. We got mealworms, right? But not proper worms.
Last question for Mark.
I can't get beyond this guy's white card here, so everyone else is going to have to. What's your question? That's a good question. What's the average lifespan of an ant? Well, the queens live the longest. In fact, the world record for an ant is, 29 years, 28 years, I forget, for an ant queen. And so that's the best deal. It's not all ant queens live that long. The workers actually do pretty well. This is something that interested me when I looked at insect longevity. Because the workers live a few months, which is actually longer than the life cycle of probably the average insect. So even though they're conducting all these battles and dying left and right to defend their colony, they still do pretty well for insects. Still a pretty good deal to be an ant worker.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break. If those of you wish to purchase Dr. Moffett's book, we'll be up here signing them in a few minutes. Please, and we'll also set up our raffle for door prizes. So we'll take like a 3 or 4 minute break. Let's thank Mark again.